On September 13, 1848, in Cavendish, Vermont, a 25-year-old railroad foreman named Phineas Gage was doing a job he had done 100 times before. He was packing explosive powder into a hole drilled into rock, using a long iron tamping rod, preparing for a routine blast to clear the path for new railroad track. The rod he was using was over 3 feet long and weighed about 13 pounds. Something sparked. The powder ignited early. The explosion launched the iron rod directly upward, entering Gage's face just below his left cheekbone. It tore through his left eye socket, destroyed a molar tooth, and plowed straight through the front portion of his brain. The rod then exited through the top of his skull and landed nearly 25 yards away, reportedly covered in blood. The force of the blast threw Gage backward onto the ground. Here is the part almost nobody believes the first time they hear it. Gage never lost consciousness. He twitched briefly on the ground, then sat up within minutes and began speaking normally to the men around him. He was helped onto an ox cart and rode sitting upright for the trip into town, holding a conversation the entire way. At his hotel, while waiting for a doctor, Gage sat calmly on the porch and chatted with curious onlookers who had gathered to see the hole in his skull. When Dr. John Martin Harlow arrived, he initially didn't believe the rod had actually passed through Gage's head until he examined the wound himself and confirmed it. Against all odds, Gage survived. Infection set in for several weeks, and there were moments doctors thought he wouldn't make it, but he eventually recovered enough to return home about 10 weeks later. Physically, Gage had no issues with movement or speech. But according to Dr. Harlow's notes, something about his personality had changed. Harlow described him as fitful, irreverent, and prone to language he never would have used before the accident, eventually writing the now famous line that friends considered him no longer Gage. His previous employer, who had once considered him their most efficient and capable worker, refused to give him his job back specifically because of this personality shift. For decades, Gage's story was taught using only this version, presenting him as a tragic, ruined man whose decency was destroyed forever by his injury. But here's what most retellings leave out. Gage went on to work for years afterward, including as a long-distance stagecoach driver in Chile, a demanding job that required careful planning, sharp attention, and reliable judgment. Modern researchers studying the original case notes now believe the dramatic personality change Harlow described likely only lasted 2 to 3 years, not the rest of Gage's life as commonly assumed. Historians have also found that Harlow's original writing was less extreme than later textbooks made it sound, and that popular science writers exaggerated the story further with each retelling over the following century. Gage eventually moved to California, working steadily until he began experiencing severe epileptic seizures, almost certainly a long-term effect of his brain injury. He died on May 21, 1860, nearly 12 years after the accident that should have killed him instantly. His skull and the famous iron rod were later donated to Harvard Medical School, where both remain on public display today. Phineas Gage's case became one of the founding stories of modern neuroscience, the first strong evidence that damage to a specific part of the brain could directly change personality and behavior. But his real story is more complicated and more hopeful than the ruined man legend that took over for more than a century. Did you know about Phineas Gage before this video? Let me know in the comments.